I woke up to the sound of nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of this old house settling into its foundation. My eyes drifted to the empty pillow beside me, still perfectly fluffed from when I made the bed yesterday. 2 years ago, my mornings were filled with the scent of brewing coffee, the rustle of newspaper pages turning, and Sarah's sleepy smile when she'd catch me staring at her. Now, it's just me and the silence that follows me from room to room like an unwanted shadow. Another thrilling day in paradise, I muttered to the empty kitchen as I poured myself a cup of coffee. My life had become painfully predictable after Sarah died. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I'd perfected the art of existing without living. On top of that, my freelance editing job enabled me to stay at home for weeks without speaking to anyone beyond the grocery store cashier. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was my sister. Again. This was her third call this week. I watched it ring until it stopped. I'll call her back, I told myself. Just like I'd told myself last week. And the week before that. One evening, as I collected my mail, I noticed something unusual mixed in with the standard envelopes. A small, unstamped envelope with childish handwriting that read simply, "To Dad." I stood on my porch, staring at the envelope. It clearly wasn't meant for me. Turning it over in my hands, I wondered how it had found its way into my mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper covered in careful, rounded handwriting. Dear Dad. I'm sorry I was mad at you the day before you left. I didn't mean those things I said. Mom says you can still hear me, even though you're in heaven now. I hope that's true. I got an A on my science project. It was about butterflies. Remember how we used to catch them in the backyard? I miss doing that with you. I love you a billion stars. Lily. I read it twice, each word landing like a stone in my chest. Sarah and I had talked about having kids. We'd even picked out names. Back then, we had no idea we were planning a future that would never come. To Dad, I whispered, running my finger over the words. I never got to be anyone's dad. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. I thought the right thing to do would be to return it. I'd seen a young girl playing in the yard a few houses down. I thought I'd start from there. The woman who answered the door looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. When I explained about finding the letter, her expression shifted from confusion to understanding. Lily's father passed away last year, she said quietly. She still writes to him sometimes. It helps her cope. I understand, I replied, my voice rougher than I intended. Loss is complicated. The letter somehow came into my box, so I wanted to make sure she got it back. She took the envelope with a grateful nod. Thank you for bringing it back. It means more than you know. As I walked home, a question nagged at me. If Lily writes letters to her father, where does she put them? Clearly not in her home mailbox if this one had somehow ended up in mine. A few days later, I spotted Lily while I was taking out the trash. She was walking down the street clutching another envelope, her dark pigtails bouncing with each step. Instead of heading toward her house, she stopped at an old, rusted mailbox in front of the abandoned Miller place. No one had lived there for years. I watched as she glanced around nervously before slipping the letter inside. There was something secretive about her movements, like she was performing a ritual no one else was supposed to see. That night, on my way back from a rare evening walk, I remembered Lily's strange behavior. Almost without thinking, I found myself standing in front of that rusted mailbox. It was ridiculous to be so curious about a child's letters, but something about it bothered me. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly flipped open the mailbox. It was empty. I checked again, thinking maybe the letter had slipped to the back, but there was nothing inside. The letter was gone. Someone was taking them. As I walked home, questions swirled in my mind. Who would take letters meant for a dead man? And why? The thought that someone might be interfering with a child's grieving process made my stomach turn. For the first time in months, I felt something other than the dull ache of my own grief. It was a spark of protective anger and curiosity that refused to be ignored. Little did I know this spark would lead me to something I wasn't expecting. The next evening, I found myself sitting in my car across from the abandoned house, feeling half crazy for doing so. What kind of middle-aged man stakes out a mailbox? But I needed to know who was taking those letters. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, a figure approached the rusted mailbox. He was tall and thin, with hunched shoulders like he was carrying an invisible weight. The man glanced around furtively before reaching into the mailbox and retrieving Lily's latest letter. He held it with unexpected gentleness, almost reverently, before slipping it into his jacket pocket. I waited until he was halfway down the block before following him at a distance. He led me to a small apartment complex on the edge of town. I watched as he unlocked number 14 and disappeared inside. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, debating what to do next. This was none of my business. I could drive home, forget the whole thing, and return to my comfortable isolation. Instead, I found myself standing at door number 14. My heart pounded against my chest as I knocked. When the door opened, I came face to face with a man about my age, though life had been harder on him. His eyes widened in alarm when he saw me. "Can I help you?" His voice was wary. I cut straight to the point. "I saw you take the letter from the mailbox." "The one from Lily." His eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, I thought he might slam the door. Instead, his shoulders sagged in defeat. "You'd better come in," he said. The apartment was sparsely furnished but clean. Books were stacked on every surface, and a small desk in the corner was covered with papers. He gestured toward the only chair while he remained standing. "Who are you?" I asked. "Daniel." I'm her father's brother," he replied, looking down. "You're not from the family, are you?" I shook my head. "No. I live down the street from Lily. One of her letters ended up in my mailbox by mistake." Daniel walked to the desk and pulled open a drawer. Inside was a stack of envelopes, all with the same childish handwriting. I found the first one by accident while I was checking the old house to make sure no pipes had burst last winter. "My brother and I grew up there." "And you've been collecting them ever since," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He looked ashamed. I know I should have thrown them away or responded to them, but what? "My brother and I had a falling out before he died," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Nothing major, just stupid brother stuff. I kept telling him I'd visit, but I was always too busy with work. Then he died suddenly, and I never got to fix things." "So, you disappeared?" I couldn't face them. His wife and his daughter. What right did I have to be part of their lives when I couldn't even make time for him when he was alive? He pulled open another drawer and extracted a different stack of envelopes. "These are all my responses to her letters. I never had the courage to send them." I flipped through them. Each was addressed simply to Lily, in careful handwriting, as if he'd spent hours perfecting each letter. "Every time I try to deliver one, I panic," he continued. "Responding would mean facing my guilt, explaining why I vanished. So I figured it's easier to just stay away." At that point, I realized that looking at him was like looking in a mirror. Hadn't I been doing the same thing since Sarah died? I thought. Pushing away friends, ignoring family, all to avoid the pain of moving forward without her? "She probably thinks you don't care," I said quietly. Daniel flinched. "I know. That's the worst part." After meeting Daniel, I walked home in a daze. The parallels between us were too stark to ignore. We were both men trapped by grief, avoiding the people who still needed us. Back in my empty house, I couldn't settle. I paced from room to room as Daniel's words echoed in my head. Finally, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months. I opened the box of Sarah's things I'd packed away after the funeral. Among the photos and keepsakes was a small yellow post-it note. Sarah had stuck it to the refrigerator one ordinary Tuesday morning. It read, "Don't forget to call your mom. People don't stay forever. Love you. S." The words hit me harder than I expected. I don't remember if I'd internalized these words when she'd put up the note. But this time, it felt different. I spent that night staring at my phone, looking at all the missed calls and unread messages. My sister checking in. My mother asking if I was coming for Christmas. Old friends inviting me to dinner, then eventually stopping when I never responded. All this time, I'd been waiting for others to pull me out of my grief. But the truth was that I needed to be the one to take the first step. I needed to bring myself out of my suffering. And I guess Daniel needed to do the same. He had to come out of his grief, and I was ready to help him with it. So, the next morning, I made a decision. Instead of walking past Lily's house like I usually did, I stopped and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, her mother appeared on the doorstep. "I need to tell you something about Lily's letters," I told her. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock as I explained about Daniel. "You found him," she said, voice tight with anger. "He had years to come back. What makes now any different?" "He regrets not being there," I said carefully. "He's been reading every letter Lily writes, and what?" She cut me off. "I'm supposed to forget how he abandoned us when we needed him most? How Lily cried for her uncle at the funeral, and he couldn't even show up?" I took a deep breath. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Since then, I've pushed away everyone who cared about me because facing them meant facing my grief. I'm not saying you should forgive him. I'm just saying, maybe Lily deserves to know he's still out there. That he still cares. She stared at me for a long moment. "I'll think about it," she mumbled before closing the door. That evening, after 3 hours of convincing, Daniel stood beside me on Lily's front porch. He looked like he might bolt at any second. "I can't do this," he whispered. "Yes, you can," I said and knocked before he could change his mind. Lily's mother opened the door. Her expression was guarded, but she stepped aside to let us in. "Mom? Who is it?" Lily appeared in the hallway, a book clutched to her chest. When she saw Daniel, her eyes widened in shock. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lily broke the silence. "Uncle Danny?" Her voice was small but clear. "Where have you been?" Daniel began to speak but no words came out of his mouth. "I'd been hoping you'd come visit us someday," she said as her voice cracked. "I looked for you whenever I went outside with Mommy, but you weren't there. Don't you care about me, Uncle Danny?" Daniel made a choked sound. "I was scared," he finally admitted, tears streaming down his face. "I was a coward. And I hate myself for it." Lily's lips quivered, and tears welled in her eyes. Then, surprisingly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. "I missed you," she whispered. Daniel fell to his knees, hugging her properly. "I've missed you too, Lilybug. So much." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the stack of letters he'd collected. "I read every single one. And I kept them all." "You did?" Lily took them, her fingers tracing her own handwriting. "I thought the mailman took my letters." "It was me," he said. "And you know what? I wrote back too." He offered her the second stack. I never sent them." Lily's eyes widened as she looked at all the letters her uncle had written for her. "These are so many of letters," she chirped. "I'll read them all, I promise." As Lily and Daniel reconnected, Lily's mother watched from the doorway. The anger I witnessed earlier that day was now replaced with relief. I could tell she still had things to say to Daniel, questions that needed answering. But for now, she let Lily have this moment. Sensing it wasn't my place anymore, I quietly stepped away, leaving them to mend what had been broken. Outside, the evening air felt lighter, as if something long buried had been set free. I exhaled and, without thinking, changed my route. Tonight, instead of going home, I walked toward the cemetery on the hill. Sarah's grave was well maintained, and it made me realize my sister had been taking care of it. What a shame. I couldn't even look after my wife's grave now. I'd thought visiting would make the pain worse, but I realized I was wrong. Standing there, I felt a strange sense of calm. "Hey, Sarah," I whispered. "I'm sorry it's been so long." I sank down onto the grass beside her headstone and started talking. I told her about my days, about the freelance jobs I'd taken, and about how I'd kept her garden alive even though I'd never had her green thumb. I told her how much I missed her laugh and the way she always stole the blankets at night. "I've been pretty terrible at living without you," I admitted. "But I think I'm ready to try." I stayed until the stars came out, saying all the things I'd been holding inside for 2 years. When I finally stood to leave, my legs were stiff and my face wet with tears, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. As I walked home, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I expected it to be my sister, but instead, a name I hadn't seen in years flashed on the screen. Mike. He was my college roommate who tried reaching out after Sarah's funeral, but I never answered. This time, I decided to pick up. "Mark? Is that really you?" Mike asked in surprise. "Yeah," I said, smiling despite myself. "It's me. Sorry it took so long." We talked all the way home, catching up on 2 years of missed life. His voice was like a bridge back to the world I'd abandoned. Sometimes, it takes seeing someone else's pain to recognize your own. Through Lily and Daniel, I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding the courage to remember while still moving forward. There's still one thing that I haven't been able to figure out. How did Lily's letter end up in my mailbox in the first place? Did she leave it there by mistake? Did Daniel somehow guide it my way? Or maybe, just maybe, Sarah had something to do with it. Maybe she knew I needed to find that letter. To help Lily, to help Daniel, and to finally help myself. I still don't know how it ended up there, but I like to believe it wasn't just chance. I believe that some things, even the smallest miracles, happen exactly when we need them most. Write in the comments what you think about the heroes of our story and subscribe to our channel.